Hello everyone, and welcome to this webinar organised by WIPO, which is dedicated today to ISNI, the International Standard Name Identifier. I'm Michael Healy. I'm the Executive Director for International Relations at Copyright Clearance Centre based in New York. I'm very grateful to our friends at WIPO for inviting us to be part of this series of webinars. Whether you're entirely new to ISNI or familiar with it to some degree, I'm delighted you're joining us today and hope very much that you enjoy it. Today's session will be a conversation between four people who are to varying degrees deeply involved in different ways in the development of the ISNI standard and its services. At the end of this conversation, you'll have an opportunity to ask us questions, but I want to kick off today by introducing my three fellow panelists, all of whom are joining us from the UK. First, we have Tim Devonport. Tim manages the day-to-day business of ISNI, the standard and its registration authority. And then we have two speakers from the British Library in the UK, Andrew McEwen and Emma Rogos. Andrew is the head of metadata at the library, while Emma is the identifier development and operations manager. As always with these events, we're going to be short of time inevitably, so I'm going to kick off straight away with some questions for Tim, if I may. Tim, there will be people joining this webinar today who are relatively unfamiliar with ISNI, so perhaps we can start with you reminding us about some basics. What is ISNI? What's it designed to do? When did it start? Who uses it? Those sorts of things. Perhaps you could summarize some things for us around those questions.
Thanks very much, Michael. Well, to start with, ISNI is an ISO standard like ISBN, DOI, ISAN, and others with which you're probably familiar. It provides a system of unique numbers to identify and distinguish between persons and organisations that are active in various creative endeavours. ISNI identifiers, and confusingly we usually just call them ISNIs, are 16-digit dumb numbers, including a check digit. I should say that they're primarily intended for machine-to-machine interactions. Long 16-digit strings don't roll off the tongue so easily, so we can always fall back on the name which is being represented. So if you started off with 8 zeros, 7851, 9858, you're probably unaware of the fact that that's the ISNI that's been assigned to the musician Taylor Swift. ISNI really got started in 2011, so we celebrated our first decade last September. And to date, we've assigned in excess of 14 million ISNIs. Most importantly, ISNI is a collaborative and membership-led endeavour. Our regular members and registration agencies provide the majority of the data that's contributed, not to mention the very deep sector-specific expertise on which the ISNI data repository is based. I should say too that ISNI is already used very widely in the international library community, in the music industry, and an expanding area in various rights management settings. Its global coverage is already widespread and still expanding further. We have around 65 ISNI member organisations across 23 countries in Europe, North America, the Middle East and North Africa, Australasia and East Asia. A lot of our focus to date has been on using ISNIs to identify real individuals or organisations, as Andrew will explain later. But it would be equally accurate to call out their use not only for persons, but also for personas. Often important to be sure about pseudonyms, stage names, and even fictional entities, all of which can be modelled and identified within ISNI.
Well, thanks very much, Tim, for that very helpful background on ISNI. If I may, I'm now going to turn to Andrew McEwen at the British Library. Andrew, the British Library was one of the very earliest supporters of ISNI, and I'm very interested to hear from you. What was it about ISNI that prompted the library to give such wholehearted support in the early days, amongst other national libraries as well?
Thank you, Michael. Well, it really goes back to what the traditional business of cataloguing in a national library has been about. So we've always been interested in the management of identities of authors and creators in our catalogue in order to provide efficient and effective discovery for our users. And that's just been a traditional part of how we do our cataloguing. When our catalogue became more online, we started to cooperate with other libraries, and in particular, in our case, the Library of Congress and the Program for Cooperative Cataloging in the US, so that we were able to share creation of our name authorities and share the identity management burden across many libraries in the Anglophone library community. When the internet came along, it became very clear that there were a lot of other communities out there and a lot of other sectors, and it started to look as though libraries were in a bit of a silo of their own, and we became conscious that discovery was starting on search engines, and we were exposing our catalogues to search engines, which made our authority control look quite sort of siloed in comparison to all the different variant name forms and the lack of control of search around authors and creators across the web. So you could dip into a library catalogue, but we were in a context that was much broader. And we, at the same time, we became aware of other organisations like the Author Licensing and Collecting Society in the UK who were actually using our authority files as a resource to manage identities for correct attribution of rights in their own workflows. So we were starting to have dialogue and conversations outside traditional library sectors. And when ISNI came along, we were one of the libraries that were invited to participate in the drafting of the standard. And quite early on in some of those drafting committee meetings, when we were sitting around the table with many non-librarians alongside some librarians on the initial group, it became apparent that we were all doing the same work in parallel in different silos. And the light bulb moment was, well, what we actually need ISNI to do for us is to be a bridge identifier. We don't want to lose the work we've done to date. So there was a vision that we needed to bridge and link the proprietary identifiers we had in our own systems and databases. But the vision for the future was that at a point in the future when we'd established those links for our legacy data, when a new ISNI was created, wherever it was created in the world, it would flow through the supply chain and be shared across all sectors. And that was really the vision that we've held on to ever since and has made us enthusiastic supporters from the original drafting of the standard through to how we're going to implement it.
Turning, if I may, to Emma. Emma, you work very closely with Andrew, obviously, and are responsible to a great extent for implementing ISNI within the operations and services of the British Library. Can you tell us, from your perspective, has ISNI enabled the library to do things it couldn't otherwise have done, or offer services that it couldn't otherwise have offered, whether it's relating to resource discovery, cataloguing, quality, whatever? How do you see it from your perspective?
No, thanks, Michael. I think the immediate benefit that we've seen with ISNI is the fact that it's an international standard. It works across many different sectors easily. So it's made it much easier for us to collaborate with other partners, especially libraries in the first instance, right across the globe. And it's really helped to start some conversations about best practice for identity management, how we might move that forward, and workflows involved in that as well. And I can really see this leading to a lot greater collaboration, a lot more amounts of data sharing, which makes our life a lot easier, and being able to utilise each other's areas of expertise, whether that may be language or material type, just really a lot easier working together. We've already run 2 ISNI summits in conjunction with Bibliothèque Nationale de France as well. And we've had attendees from libraries right across Europe, the United States and Asia. They've been very well attended and very useful. There was a lot of information sharing about how libraries are using ISNI at those summits. And the result of that has been the setup of a ISNI Libraries consultation group, which is sort of helping to further those conversations, looking at workflows, collaboration, etc. Within the British Library itself, we've now been looking at how we can utilise ISNI for identity management within our collections metadata and how to build workflows to help us to work more efficiently. We've been working with different areas within the library that we don't necessarily always work very closely with, for example, our sound collections, manuscripts, and showing them how ISNI can benefit them within their projects that they're working on. And then that helps to improve resource discovery for our users, which is a benefit to all of us. We're also working more closely with other sectors now, such as the music industry, publishing industry, helping to devise best practice policies for identity management. And in that way, ISNI is helping us to collaborate in a way that's benefiting everyone.
Well, thanks very much, Emma. You touched there on the potential within the publishing industry, and I'd like to go back to Andrew, because it seems to me, Andrew, that the potential value of ISNI to book publishers is at least potentially immense. And I know you've been involved in an initiative involving trade publishers in the UK to look at the potential implementation of ISNI. Can you tell us a little bit more about that initiative?
Yes, I certainly can. This, I think, is one of the more exciting things we've done. As I said earlier, we started talking with other sectors prior to our implementation of ISNI, but since ISNI went live and since we've been involved in it, we've tried to do some outreach and actually connect more positively about what can we do and how can we promote ISNI. So we were supported in this by an organisation called Book Industry Communications in the UK, who set us up a brief face-to-face meeting with an invited group of publishers just to promote and explain what ISNI is, what people were doing with it. We had the Bibliothèque Nationale explaining how they'd done some work with it and were working with publishers in France already. And that generated more interest. We then had a second meeting that we jointly organised with Publisher Licensing Services in the UK, and we had some of the same people back, some other publishers. We did another sort of round table of, these are the presentations of what's going on in ISNI, how it might be useful to you. And I think from these two meetings, we could see there was a lot of interest, but it was a case of, well, publishers didn't want to step up and just become members. They wanted to know, how can we get these ISNIs and where do we go to get them? So we, the BL, decided to start hosting a series, what turned into a series of meetings. We hosted a first meeting to say, what could we actually do as some practical next steps? And we just thought about, well, we have the British National Bibliography. We know that corresponds to UK publications. We know that legacy publications have all their authors in the publishers' databases. And we decided to look at developing some algorithms. This is some of the kind of work we do anyway with our linked data version of the BMB. And through a process of triangulation between ISBNs for product data and authors within the metadata for those products, and linking those through to our authority files and therefore through to ISNI, where all those links were already established through the foundational database in ISNI, we could triangulate and actually supply back to publishers in their back files pretty high numbers. I think it's something over 160,000, which was 60 to 70% of what about 18 publishers have supplied to us over a couple of years now. So we've been doing this as an ongoing initiative and a project to just prove the concept of we can get you these ISNIs. Some of them are now starting to appear in the supply chain, which is great news for us because we see the ISNIs coming through and we know that we supplied those out to the publishers and we know we can trust them coming back into the supply chain attached to new publications and the author metadata with those. Our next steps that we're currently at now exploring is we've started to adopt assigning ISNIs, doing a lookup and assign ISNIs in our cataloguing and publication workflows. We want to build on that and get to a point where we are assigning ISNIs for everything that comes through our CIP workflows for the British National Bibliography. We're going to be meeting back with the publishers and start to explore what are the mechanisms for getting those back into the supply chain so that they will keep feeding through as a loop. Something similar has been done by Bibliothèque Nationale with a few publishers in France as well. So we know the concept is out there, and it's a case of just building this from the ground up now. But it's a really exciting prospect, and I think it is something of a game changer in terms of we've never had this level of cooperation on something as sort of library specific as identity management in the past. So it's really nice to see it working right across the supply chain.
Well, thanks very much, Andrew, for summarising those interesting developments. I'd like to go back now, if I may, to Emma for a moment. Emma, I noticed last year, probably it was, the British Library launched a public-facing portal for ISNI, and that allows individuals to apply for ISNIs, even to report what they might see as errors and so on. And what has the reaction been to the launch of the BL's ISNI portal?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, we launched the portal at the beginning of 2021, and the reaction to that has been really quite positive. We've had some really good feedback from users. One of the things that people find is it's very quick and convenient to use. People see the results that they input into their ISNI record straight away. It's in real time. They don't have to wait to input a request and wait for a response. They feel that they've got ownership of their own data as well. So rather than having to ask somebody else to add data to their records, they can do that themselves. They get to add the data that they want when they want to add it. And that's really been quite a benefit we've seen and the feedback that we've got. As you say, people can also report any kind of corrections that they think that need to be done. So we're not allowing users to change any data, but they can get in touch with us and we can do that for them. And through that as well, they're getting access to experts in the data. So my team are part of the ISNI quality team who help to look after the ISNI database and the quality of that data. And they've got a lot of expertise. And so users can get in touch with them, ask questions, report anything they see and get a quick response about those things. Also, no limits on data additions as well. People are finding that's quite useful. They can go in as many times as they want to, add data to multiple records, or add data to one single record multiple times, whatever they need to do. We actually think we've responded to a demand that was for an end user service that people were actually expecting already existed. When they hear about ISNI, they thought there would be somewhere they could go on, they could log in and they could add data to their own records. So we've now actually provided the thing that they thought existed already. And I've really been pleased with the reach that the portal is getting. I've heard it mentioned through quite a number of different channels within different sectors. So I know that users are becoming more aware of it. For example, I heard it mentioned within a library and information webinar that I attended. I've also seen it mentioned on social media channels with music professionals recommending it to colleagues to say, this is one a really great place, convenient place to get an ISNI assigned, go and check it out. So that's really been quite pleasing from our perspective.
Well, thanks again, Emma, for those initiatives you've summarised for us. We've heard a lot already about how ISNI is being deployed in national libraries, a little bit about trade book publishing, etc. But if I can turn now to you, Tim, one of the really noticeable successes of ISNI in recent years has been its very rapid and increasing adoption within the music industry. And at this point, I think it's fair to say that music is one of the most appreciative users of the ISNI standard. Can you tell us why that is and what specific benefits you've heard from contacts in the music industry that ISNI is bringing to music?
Good question, Michael, and it's nice to do a shout out to our friends in the music community. Who I think are that best possible type of community. They're very demanding, but very committed to actually implementing ISNI. I think, honestly, that the music industry's enthusiasm has had both generic drivers in common with those from other sectors, things like the need for clean data, ability to organise crosswalks between other systems, improved discoverability, and then other things which are more specific to music itself. First and foremost, no matter where you stand on all the hot questions about whether artists are receiving the proper reward for their efforts, music publishers really do work hard to disperse payments where they are due. And doing this in an unambiguous and largely automatic way assumes particular importance for music usage, if we like to call it that, driven by profile-driven discovery and streaming. Peer pressure, or should I say encouragement, within the industry doesn't half help too. All ISNI's users and contributors are very much valued by us, but it's amazing to see the ripple effects in the industry when a Google, YouTube, or an Apple, to name but two, indicate their interest in a particular standard. It certainly focuses the attention down through the supply chain. Two quick use cases that we're currently wrestling with in a good sort of way. One is the idea of issuing one or more ISNIs under embargo, so that everything in the supply chain is ready to go ahead of the top secret launch of a new supergroup or other collaboration. And another is how best to reliably assign ISNIs to new artists or bands, essentially at the point where they're going into the studio for the very first time. So I think that the success of ISNI thus far and the levels of enthusiasm we've seen has been fed by a collaboration of those different factors.
Thanks very much, Tim, for summarising those interesting developments of what's happening in the music industry with ISNI. It occurs to me, Tim, that there may be people on today's webinar who want to know where they ought to go to find more information about what we're up to with ISNI, what the latest news is. Perhaps you can summarise for us how people can get in touch with us and where they can go for further information.
Yes, important point, I think, Michael, because I'm conscious that we're throwing quite a lot of information out there with not a lot of reference backup, shall we say. There are a number of ways to learn more, or if you wish to get further involved in ISNI. I'd say the first port of call should probably be ISNI's website, isni.org. There you'll find quite a lot of information, ranging from news items through a range of pages on how ISNI works, to some out-and-out technical documentation for those who need the detail. Also on the website, you can search for entries in the ISNI database, find out how to apply for an ISNI, or sign up to a mailing list to receive our quarterly newsletter, ISNI News, and other alerts. For other queries and suggestions, you can always drop us an email via info@isni.org. I'd like to mention also some more specialised forums or communities. These are ISNI's sector-specific consultation groups. So far, we've established 3 of these very successfully, and these cater to the communities of libraries, the research sector, and the music industry. And in each of these groups, we have quite hot debates and very valuable interactions with representatives of those communities. Each of those groups meets approximately quarterly, and we use that to bring together opinion both from organisations that are already members of ISNI and interested others from those various areas of endeavour. Building on what Andrew said a little bit earlier on, we're also looking to the possibility of establishing a publishing group in the fairly near future. If you're interested in any of those areas particularly, then it's probably easiest if you could email us again on info@isni.org, and we can then signpost you to the chairs of those respective groups.
Well, thanks very much, Tim. I hope anybody on today's webinar who has questions about ISNI will follow the pointers you've given us today, and indeed anyone with questions about what we're doing, what we're planning to do, and so on, will contact us by email, as you suggest. There will be, of course, an opportunity on this webinar to hear questions from the audience. But before we move to that, I want to take this opportunity to thank Andrew, Tim and Emma for their contributions today, and looking forward very much to hearing the questions and comments of the audience today. Thank you very much indeed.